This is the Sick'em Podcast, powered by Rogue Media Network. The Sick'em Podcast is a production of Baylor Athletics. Now, here are your hosts, Brooke Bednarz and the voice of the Bears, John Morris.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Sick'em Podcast, presented by Rogue Media Network, a presentation of Baylor Athletics. John Morris, Brooke Bednarz, and Brooke, we have covered, I think, every sport at Baylor, right?
I would
say so,
Over the course
of our podcast. We're going to branch out even further this year with a shout-out to Acrobatics and Tumbling. How about we talk some MMA today?
I mean,
how about that? And UFC.
Right. If you would have ever said to me, Brooke, you're going to have a UFC fighter on your show, I'd be like, how did that happen? And
right.
The story of how it happened with that shout-out to A&T is quite amazing. So very much looking forward to this one.
Very much so. And we are pleased and honored to have with us former Baylor Acrobatics and Tumbling All-American, now UFC fighter, Hailey Cowan. Hailey, welcome to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been listening to you since I was a little kid, so it's pretty cool to be
thanks
here.
Very much. That is nice. I don't even take offense to that. You being a little kid, so that's really cool because you grew up in Waco, Midway High School grad, Baylor University, A&T, and still here in Central Texas.
Yeah, the town just can't get rid of me.
That's good.
Well, we're now very proud to have you be from here.
Hey, she's got a billboard on I-35.
Yeah, she does.
I think there's another one, too, they said. I don't know where it is, but
really?
I think 2 billboards.
Two billboards.
Billboards. Way to go.
Made it. Made it, Mom.
That's great.
Yeah, I would say so.
So congratulations on your success. Most recently, that win in
Vegas.
Yes.
Right?
Which is a huge
Dana
win.
White's Contender Series.
That's it, yeah. Which got you a UFC
Can you tell
contract?
me don't talk about UFC very often?
Most people don't. Y'all are doing great because usually I'm with people who think they've been in like a fight when they were a kid, you know, in the schoolyard, and so they think they understand MMA. And so it's nice to be around people who are like, hey, I don't really know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you are very much the expert here, and we are very excited to ask you questions.
We're complete novices.
I love it.
But you are our source, so
yes.
any
Perfect.
questions we have, we're going to just turn that over to you.
Sounds good to me.
And you look great also, and which is nice because you've got some wedding pictures coming up. Oh, you're getting married this Saturday.
Surprise.
Surprise.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I was telling y'all earlier, you know, they were like, wow, your defense was so good this fight. And I was like, well, I kind of didn't really have an option. Like, defense had to be on point. So thank goodness I didn't come out with any scratches or cuts
face.
or bruises.
Yeah. No,
your
not the
opponent
face.
can't say that.
No. She's okay, though. She's good. She's good. I've
Yeah.
been checking on her, talking to her every day.
That's
Trying
awesome.
to speak. I actually took 2 years of Portuguese in college, and she's Brazilian, and I thought that I was nailing these conversations, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go put what I've said in Portuguese into Google Translate and see what happens. Was not nailing the conversations, but was getting the point across. But I was like, good
she's
Lord,
just kind
what
of
was I
smiling
doing?
at you like, yeah, okay.
She's like, oh, she's trying.
Your fiancé, soon-to-be husband, is Jake Brennan, who happens to be your trainer and your coach. Tell us about that. Tell us, it's a great story how y'all met and got together.
Yeah, you know, so I graduated from Baylor 2014, had a pretty nasty shoulder injury my senior year, and I was an athlete my entire life, and it was just like, that was not how I imagined that my athletic career would end. So I was kind of looking for something, you know, to fill that void, and I had always loved MMA, and I was talking to my dad, and he was like, well, you know what? I mean, if you're going to, you should go do some jiu-jitsu tournaments. You should go find a jiu-jitsu gym, which is one of the, there's like 4 major components of MMA, and that's one of the major ones. When you see people rolling around on the ground, that's jiu-jitsu. And so I kind of just walked into the gym, found the right gym, jumped in head first, called Monday. That was on a Thursday. Called Monday, quit my job, and started training full-time.
Wow. And Jake was there.
And Jake was the coach. So
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with him, you know, every day I was training because I was almost 23. So I had some ground, you know, these people that I was about to compete against have been training since they could walk.
Yeah.
So I felt like, you know, I had some ground to make up. So I was constantly in the gym, constantly training. I got a job at Gold's because I could work overnight and then train all day. So it was like, yeah. So I was a busy. I was a busy girl.
Sleep?
Yeah, I slept. So I became a personal trainer. I would wake up in the morning. I had my first client at 4:30 a.m., which usually they wouldn't let clients come until 5, but they let me come in a little early. 4:30 a.m. to 10:30. Got to the gym at 11. Trained at their daytime classes from like 11 to 1, back to the gym, 1:30, training clients from 1:30 to 5, back to MMA training from 5:30 to 8:30, and then I'd have one more client until 10:30. So I was getting to sleep from like maybe midnight to 3:30.
Good
and I did that for about a year.
That's heavy-duty training.
Yeah, it is.
You were making up for that lost time, right?
Well, I was trying. I was definitely trying to make up for lost time, and I was really enjoying it. And Gold was cool too because whenever I'd have an hour between clients, I'd get to do my strength and conditioning training, which is also a big part of MMA. So it was like everything was falling together. It was a struggle, but does success really feel like success if you're not struggling? So I feel like I was just paying my dues. Never really complained. Just did it and was excited, for a time where I didn't have to do that anymore. So.
Well, I think you found that time.
Well,
maybe.
we're still working to it, But yeah.
Maybe you sleep a little bit more these days?
I've checked one of the boxes. I've got a bunch of boxes that I've got to check, and I've checked probably the biggest one I've checked so far. So
yeah.
Big time. So your background, Midway High School, competitive cheer, what else? Gymnastics?
So I started in gymnastics, quit gymnastics when I was about 15 or 16, and then transitioned to cheer just because it made sense.
Right.
Didn't really, acro wasn't a thing yet. I was on the inaugural team. I believe I signed the first scholarship, maybe the second. So when they came in and were looking at me, I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, oh, cool, some people from Baylor are here. The coach really didn't know either yet.
Yeah.
The sport was still in its infancy. So when I signed the contract, all I knew was I was going to get to be a Baylor athlete.
Yeah.
Or the contract, the scholarship. I didn't know what I was getting myself into until the first meet, really. None of us did.
Wow.
So it was wild.
It was new. It was brand new. You were here the first year of the sport, and y'all were all, I guess, kind of learning together, weren't you, about A&T?
Well, and it was such a weird combination of athletes because when you have gymnasts and cheerleaders, there's two totally different mindsets, two totally different backgrounds. Gymnasts are gym rats. They were born in the gym, spending, 25, 30 hours a week in the gym and competing on the weekends. Cheerleading, you practice a couple hours a day. So it was two totally different
groups of people
with two totally different mindsets, and I don't know how we didn't kill each other, but we didn't. And then it almost worked out better that way because it was able to bring we were able to bring different things to the table.
So I am interested to see, as someone who is the very first here at Baylor, to see all that A&T here at Baylor has become, and all the national championships and all the new crazy stunts that they're pulling.
Yeah, they started winning when I graduated, so I was like,
But what are your thoughts on the fact that you truly, pioneered this sport that's become what it has been?
It's like one of my favorite things to tell people is that, I was and honestly, I'm a pioneer in MMA now too. Women's MMA is still brand new. So it's like, there was probably, I would say, two groups or generations before me in women's MMA, but we're still at the very beginning of it too. So being able to kind of maneuver it in acro, and now I'm able to maneuver, my way through another sport in its infancy is pretty cool. Maybe I'll just keep, making up new sports.
Yeah.
just keep talking to us through it all,
Right. You got to be proud of that, though.
I am, man. It was fun. And it was hard in acro. It was really hard because our coaches were learning, too. I got beat up in acro. I broke my nose twice in acro. I got beat up more in acro than I do in MMA. Everyone's like, how does getting hit? I'm like, I've been getting hit since I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
It's just these I'm expecting coming in acro. Next thing I know, I'm laying out on the floor. But that was the hardest part was, because we were creating new skills. And so our safety, they're much safer now because we didn't know what we were doing.
Right.
They've got a bunch of new equipment that they can use now. And I don't know. It's cool to see. It's fun to watch because I'll see them do skills at meets and be like, I was the first one to compete that.
Yeah.
So
nice.
It's pretty cool. Or, hey, I remember creating that. That was a disaster when we were trying to figure it out. So it's pretty cool to see.
That is neat. Well, I am interested to hear what your trainer, fiance, said to you, the first reaction he had when you walked into this gym as a gymnastics, cheerleader, acro background experience, and then you're like, so I want to do this thing called MMA.
So when I walked in, I went in with my dad, who's like huge. He's like 6'3", 240 pounds, played college football, phenomenal athlete. But when we walked in, it was still at that point in MMA where I always say, I don't want it to sound like I'm being condescending, but the women at that point were very skilled. They weren't very athletic yet.
Right.
So they were masters of karate, masters of wrestling, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, but none of them were there were a couple that were good athletes. So when I came in with the gymnastics background and I looked like an athlete, I think he got really excited because it was like, oh, what can we do with this one?
Yeah.
Like, because there was no romantic involvement yet. So it was just kind of like, here is a blank canvas and I get to build this athlete.
Yeah.
And so I walked in and I'm real long for my weight class. And in my head, I'm like, oh, they're going to make me the striker. I'm going to go in and I'm going to knock everybody out. And the first thing he says to me is he goes, we're going to make you a wrestler. And I was like, what? What? Okay, coach, whatever you say. Like, you're the boss. I don't know what I'm doing. He was right. My last fight, I striked a lot. But I also fought a girl who was a phenomenal wrestler. So I try to neutralize everybody. And so that's kind of what we created. But it was pretty cool because when I left the gym, the first time I went there, I got a message from him, and he was like, do you want to be a world champion? And I was like, yeah.
That's what I walked in there for.
Yeah, and he's like, well, let's become a world champ. So we're on our way. I actually won my first championship, my first belt, my second fight ever as an amateur. So that was cool, but not the belt I was looking. Because to me, there's one belt, and it says UFC on it. All the other ones are like, oh, that's cool, you won a belt. But the best of it's like being in the MLB versus being in the minor leagues, you know. And so now I'm not in the minor leagues anymore, and so now I'm looking at that big gold belt, and the girl that has it right now, I've been watching her since I was in college. So it's pretty cool to see it's just so close. I'm just I'm a few contracts away, probably 6 or 7 fights away from getting that. So
who is that? What's her name?
Amanda Nunes.
Okay. She's
a champs, which means she's a champion of 2 weight classes, which is really hard to do. Yeah.
So somewhere in the future, maybe in the near future, we could see you and her together.
I would love that more than anything. I have a feeling she's going to retire within the next year or two. She's already done everything. It's like she's already beat everyone in the division. I'm new. There's a bunch of new girls that are really good, but when you're at the top, you don't really see that yet. Yeah, I got to go in and earn my way up there. So I imagine she'll retire before. I hope not, because there's a bunch of legends that are still in my division right now that are like on their way out. And I'm like, oh man, I want to fight all of them. Not because I want to hurt these girls, but because I just want to have the opportunity to share the cage with these women who've pioneered this sport. It's cool. It's cool.
That's great.
Well, I was going through, of course, doing my research, looking at Instagram, and what kind of shocked me is if someone, which we've already admitted I'm not a UFC expert by any means, but
you're not a UFC expert
yet.
There you go. Nice.
Very true. You got to start somewhere, and this is me walking in the gym.
Exactly.
But it was really neat to see your perspective, which I'm not sure, and I would love for you to kind of dive deeper into, because if people haven't read your captions, but it was, thanking the fighter that you just went up against and your competitor of thank you for beautiful violence. And there's a lot of people who see UFC and they're like, I don't get it. They're fighting, they're hitting each other. But for you to call it that, the two polar opposite words, beautiful violence, and then talk about how neat it is to be staring at an opponent who has like analyzed your every move to try to take you down. That just struck me, and I really am interested to hear your perspective on that, because that's, as a fan and someone watching it, maybe they don't picture that or think that way.
I always say that in MMA there are martial artists and there are fighters, and I consider myself a martial artist. I never want to hurt. My first fight, my parents were like, is she going to be able to do this? Because I was apologizing to my opponent every time I touched her. And then she would land she would land a good strike, and I'd like give her a thumbs up. And my coach is like, you need to focus. And I was like, no, I am focused. And I choked, in 2019, I had a really, really, I hurt the girl that I was fighting pretty badly. And, after I choked her and she was unconscious, and I was like laying there, like yelling for the doctor to hurry up and come, just because, this dream is a weird one, and there aren't very many people that have it, and that they're putting in the same kind of work you are. So there should be a mutual respect. I've fought a couple girls that are more fighters than martial artists, but no, I feel like, it takes two to tango. So people who don't thank their opponents, it's like, without your opponent, what are you going to do? Get in there and shadow box for 15 minutes? Nobody wants to see that. Like, Yeah, and it's more of a chess match for me. Like, I enjoy it so much. There's such a raw honesty when you're standing in the cage and you're looking at somebody who has, like you said, studied your strengths and your weaknesses, thinks that they know the answer, and you feel the same way. It's such a cool feeling, and you're about to find out who prepared better. Wow. And so, yeah, it's a different kind of nerves. It's a different kind of, I don't know. But I tell everyone, after the first minute or so, after the first exchange, you usually know how the fight's going to go. Yeah. You can usually have a pretty good idea. If I stay focused and don't just get, clipped with something that I didn't see coming, usually after that first 60 seconds, you have an idea about how the fight's going to go. Huh. Yeah.
How tough-minded are you? I mean, you've got to be.
She's got to be.
I know, exactly. I mean, just to have the mindset to do this, but then tough-minded stepping into the ring.
Yeah, I'm very physical, and everyone always wants to talk about that because of my gymnastics background, but I take way more pride in my mental toughness. Yeah. As a gymnast, I was extremely mentally weak, which I don't know why. Maybe I was in the wrong place. I don't know. I was scared of everything. And I actually got in a car accident in 2007. So I was 15, right before my 16th birthday. And it's like my entire personality changed. When I was at Baylor, no nerves, all business. I was like the clutch athlete. Like, if you needed to throw somebody in and you knew that they were going to hit it, that you threw me in. Like, maybe I wasn't going to score a 10 every time, but I was going to score a 9.8 or a 9.9, and you knew what you were going to get out of me. Wow. And that's how it is with MMA too. You have these fighters that they call gym heroes, and they look great in the gym, and then you throw them in the cage, and it's like, what happened? Yeah. They freeze, they go crazy, they forget all their training, and then you've got the ones that look horrible in the gym, and they get in the cage, and they just look like these masters of the art. But me, you know exactly what you're going to get. Whatever I look like in the gym, I'm going to look like that in the cage. So I feel like that's one thing and I take my mental approach to the sport just as seriously as I take my physical approach. I see a mental coach. I'm usually on point. Usually mental coaches are seeing people who are having issues. I see it as a preventative measure. I'm usually on point, and he just kind of gives me some trigger words because my issue isn't fear ever. It's like I'm super ADD. And so I'll notice people, and like I'll be fighting, and I'll be like, "Oh, my mom's over there," and so he gives me like trigger words. Hey, like you how to pull yourself back into the zone, and so yeah, it takes, and a lot of fighters are really mental. It's wild how mental they are, like mentally weak. And so I see that, and I'm like, I don't want that, and that can happen in a second. You can get knocked out, and then it just changes your entire mindset. So I do try to keep up with my mental coach just in case. Keep me on track just in case something happens. I'm prepared for it. So. If that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it definitely makes sense.
One of your strengths, you can tell.
For sure.
So you train, let's give a shout-out to Blitz Sport MMA and Fitness in Robinson. That's your home base,
That is my home base. And then everyone's like, oh, are you going to move now? I'm like, no,
Nice.
I'm not going to move.
We want you to stay here.
Yeah, I'm going to be here.
Billboards popping up.
I got to stay here. Now there's a billboard.
Now, am I right? Most of your training is against guys?
Yeah, I train with guys. We've got one girl here that I train with. She's in a smaller weight class than me, but most of my training is with guys. I'll go, if I know I have a fight scheduled, I'll look around at other camps that are Elevation in Colorado or Extreme in Las Vegas, and I'll go and if they have a girl there that is similar to the girl that I'm fighting in height, style, whatever I'm looking for in that particular camp, I'll go out and I'll train there for camp. Because the timing with guys and girls, it's so different. It's almost a different sport. So like if I just train with guys the entire time, which is what I did pretty much my entire career up until 2022, you get in the cage and your timing is off. Guys are faster, they're stronger. They hit you with something that'll really hurt you. So what I noticed was happening is in fights, I was too aware of getting hit. With guys, I have to be really careful. Mm-hmm. And so with the girls, I was so focused on my defense that I wasn't putting forth enough offense. So when I started training with girls, I was like, okay, you learn what shots you can take and what shots you can't. And so it allowed me to kind of be a little bit more free. So I need to do it, but I just don't have any girls around here. Yeah. But it's fine. The guys make me a little tougher anyways.
Wow.
Well, we have A&T athletes who graduate every year.
I've tried every year. I've tried. So
you need to keep recruiting.
Recruit.
I've tried, man. And a lot of them actually work for my mom. My mom owns Zero Gravity, and a lot of the A&T girls work for my mom, and they'll come over and watch. And I'm like, next year.
Look good, right? You want to do this? And they're like, have you seen what you do?
Right.
So a UFC fight is coming up. You don't know exactly when. What's the timetable?
The goal.
How's that determined?
Yeah, most people don't realize. They're like, oh, what's your fight schedule? Well, you don't really have a fight schedule because you don't know what's going to happen. I could get in a fight I could go and what happened in my last fight, no bruises, no nothing, and they could call me in 2 weeks and be like, hey, a fight fell through on our next card. You want to step in?
Gotcha.
Sure. Or you could get in a fight and you'd have a barn burner and, break your shin in half and be out for a year and a half. You don't know what's going to happen. So they don't schedule us out in advance. Usually they try to give us, 6 to 12 weeks to get ready for an opponent. But there are those weird times when you got two people that are getting ready for a fight and someone gets hurt 2 weeks before, and then they'll call you to step in. They'll know you're close to weight or whatever. I want to, a good year for me, like an ideal year would be 3 to 4 fights a year. I would fight 5 or 6 times. Jake would have a heart attack, but so I'm hoping before the end of the year.
Especially as a newlywed.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
I'm hoping before the end of the year. And this is my first contract, and when you fight, it's similar to, football. Your contracts get better every contract. And so I really want to get through this contract so I can see what we can negotiate for my next one. So I've got 3 fights on it. I believe it's 3. So we'll see. I'm hoping for December would be money, but I don't really get to decide that. Yeah. So.
Well, walk us through, let's say, hypothetical, it's happening in December. With something like that, we're about to basically we're in September. So what does that look like? Like if hypothetically it's in December, when do you find out your opponent? What does your training schedule look like? And how is that tailored more toward a specific fight versus you're just everyday maintaining training?
So a lot of fighters, what they'll do is they'll have a fight camp and then they'll take time off. Well, I don't do that. So I always say I do 52-week fight camps. I'm ready to go all year long. And again, right. Again, I do that because I still feel like I'm having to make up. I'm still fighting girls who've been doing this for 20 years. So I still feel like I'm having to play catch up, and I'm still learning. But yeah, I'm trying to think. So for me, I like 8 weeks. That's like money for me. A lot of fighters that don't do 52-week fight camps, like 12 or even 13 or 14. That's too much for me. 6 is even good. So I like to know my opponent between 6 and 8 weeks out. And then I get into what we call fight camp, which is dissecting the opponent and creating the game plan and perfecting it. And a lot of fighters they'll plan for the bet. Their plan is based on what they do only in good circumstances. And what we do for me is, because I like to mentally prepare, we put me in every bad situation that you can imagine and I have to fight my way out of it. So in my last fight, I don't know if y'all watched it, round 2, I was put in a pretty bad position. Yeah. I was we could call it a head and arm choke. And but everyone's like, you're so calm. And I was like, I've been there a million times. All these other fighters, they practice, this is what I'm good at. Here's my 1-2 head kick or whatever their specialty is. And I practice that too, but I also practice, hey, this is what this opponent's good at. So let's get you in that position over and over and over and over. And, and when you're exhausted, when you're fresh, that way if it happens in a fight, we don't panic. It's like, hey, I've been here. We expected to be here. You know what to do. If you don't get there, great. But if you do, no big deal.
Yeah. So it's not over there.
Right. So my 8 weeks are much more brutal than most people's. I get very zoned in. I have to focus on not hurting my training partner because it's so hard because you practice these, these like deadly movements and it's like, it becomes muscle memory. And so you're like, okay, they're going to shoot in and you're ready to throw it because I visualize this is what's going to happen in a fight. So you have to make sure, when you're throwing it with your teammates, you're like, okay, only throw it on 50%. But everything still is happening really fast because it's happening at a live speed. So you're like, okay, don't hurt them. But it's hard. It's really hard because especially I'm in a small team. We can't hurt each other. There's not a lot of bodies. And we do know that our body, we're sacrificing a lot when we have friends that have fights coming up. We know, hey, you might get cut this camp. You might get a broken nose. You might get a concussion. Like we sacrifice our bodies for each other too. So it's a fight camp is a game of inches, and we're trying not to hurt each other while trying to implement movements that are going to hurt somebody else. It's very hard. It's very difficult, but it's fun. It's so much fun.
Are you interested in true crime, funny 1-star reviews, or inspiring stories? What about the history of Waco or the famous people who have lived and worked here? All these and more are produced by Rogue Media Network. There are over 80 different shows, including this one, with more coming all the time. If there's a story to tell, Rogue Media Network is telling it. Watch on YouTube or listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Sick 'em Podcast, presented by Rogue Media Network. John Morris, Brooke Bednarz, Hailey Cowan, our guest on Twitter at Hailey_Bree, B-R-E. Website is allhailhaileycowan.com. Lots of good information there. You're known as you're All Hail, right, in the MMA world.
Right. My coach gave me that literally the moment I walked in the gym. He found out my name. He was like, All Hail. And I was like, I kind of like that. Everyone was like, oh, Hailstorm. I'm like, there's like 40 hailstorms out there.
I love it. I think Triple B Smokehouse even had you were signing autographs, had a big welcome home party, and they had a drink.
They had a watch party. Yeah, they named an All Hail drink after me.
Nice.
It's lime green. My fighting style is, everyone knows it as Hulk Smash just because I have really sharp elbows. I smash people against the cage, and I end up cutting like everyone that I fight. So they call me Hulk Smash, and so they made a lime green drink. And they call it the All Hail. It's pretty cool.
I love it.
That's fantastic. I want to take you back to Baylor, your time here. Obviously, your experience here was a good one for you. You wanted to come to Baylor, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the A&T was the path, the avenue to get your education. But what was your overall Baylor experience like for you?
I always say the best thing that I've ever done was sign that scholarship to come to Baylor. My grandpa, my dad's dad, went to Baylor. And I'm from Waco, so Baylor's like, I just wanted to go here. And I didn't know if it was, they didn't have any sports that I played. They didn't have gymnastics. They had track. I ran track in high school, but not on that level. So I didn't, when they added acro, I was like, oh, this is in the cards for me.
Perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect. Yeah. And I had a great experience. Again, my experience was probably a lot different than most athletes because we were building a sport. We were creating a sport. But it was so much fun, and I'm glad I got to be part of that. We didn't win any championships while I was here, just every other one after.
Yeah. But y'all had some success, though. I mean, NCATA semifinals, I think 3 years, 3 or 4 years here.
We had a lot of success, and we were competing against Coach Fee, who created the sport, and he's a phenomenal coach, and I really wish that I had at least 1 year where I could have learned from her.
Right.
Even if we would have won, but even if we hadn't won, it would have been so cool to just be a student of hers. Luckily, I'm pretty close to her now, so I'm getting to experience that in a different way, but I would have loved to have had her as a coach. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun. I got to learn a lot. I got to learn how to maneuver. Again, we talked about the cheerleaders and the gymnasts. I got to learn how to deal with different types of people, which is pretty important in life. So
do you think... when people just look at the two sports, they're very different, but you kind of explained how you see MMA and UFC in a different light than maybe the typical person who watches. So do you see any parallels from your acrobatics and tumbling days and into what you do now?
If you ask any MMA coach what's the best background to come in to mixed martial arts that isn't an MMA discipline, so not boxing, not wrestling, not jiu-jitsu, they'll say gymnastics. So it was, we have more so than, we're very physical, we're very physically strong. Pound for pound, I don't care what anybody says, gymnasts are the physically strongest athletes. But we come in with an understanding of discipline and an understanding of what it takes to be great at what you're doing. And a lot of MMA fighters don't get that because in other sports, in baseball and football and gymnastics, there's levels. There's, you start when you're a kid at the club level, then you do high school, then maybe you do all-stars in high school, then you go to college if you're good enough, and then from college you hopefully turn pro. In MMA, there's not that. There aren't those levels. There's no club MMA. There's no Olympics in MMA. There's no college. So a lot of these people are thrown in as a professional athlete, and they don't know what it takes to be a professional athlete.
Yeah.
And so I came in already I had a very good understanding of what it takes to be an elite athlete. And a lot of my teammates are still learning that. But hopefully I can be, the bar maybe, okay, well, she did Division I sports, so this is how she trains, so maybe we should be training like that. And I even see the people at the very, very top in the UFC, some of the girls that I've trained with, they don't even get it. I'm like, you realize how good you would be if you would train.
But you're like, don't do that yet.
No, I always tell everybody, I want the best at their best.
Yeah.
Because I do see it as a sport. And I'm always, I do MMA to test myself. I want to see how good I can be. And I don't want to fight anyone if they're injured. I don't want to fight anyone who's not 100% because I want to be able to say, well, I beat them at their best. Yeah, so.
And you said something interesting, and I have no hesitation in saying here at Baylor, our acrobatics and tumbling student athletes, pound for pound,
Oh,
are
definitely.
the best athletes.
Yeah,
they really
absolutely.
Are. They really
absolutely are.
Yeah.
They have to do everything. You know, they're not just running. They're not just jumping. You know, they're literally any physical movement, they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Explosiveness, strength, speed, agility. I mean, they literally embody what it is to be an athlete.
Yeah.
So, and that's helped me so much. Like the first time I was at a jiu-jitsu tournament and a girl did a judo throw, tried to throw me, and I landed on my feet.
Ah.
And everyone was like, "What?" And I was like, "I know
you
where
do
I
that?"
am in the air." Like, I was like, "Why can't y'all do that?" Like, so it's given me like I understand, and my understanding of the space around me. Like people, you know, we have a big cage, and you run into the cage, and I'm always very aware of where everything is, and it's just because I've been upside down my entire life, so I just understand, you know, my body versus the environment around me, and it's. Again, like I said, the best. I think acro, I'm obviously biased, but I think acro or gymnastics is the best background for anything.
There you go.
But it's definitely a good one for what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you here. We're very excited for you. We love that you're proud of your Baylor background, you know, and your Waco, Central Texas background. That's great. And wish you nothing but the best. Can't wait till we see what's next in the UFC.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us, and enjoy your wedding this
Yes,
Saturday.
congrats.
Congratulations on that.
That'll
Tell
be fun.
Jake we said congratulations
I
also.
will.
Yeah.
I will.
Big life changes for you lately.
That is great. Well, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it. Hailey Cowan, our guest on the Sikkim podcast, presented by Rogue Media Network. Hey, let me remind you, I've had the privilege of calling games, telling stories about Baylor athletics and Baylor athletes, student athletes, like Hailey Cowan for a long time. Storytelling is an art, and there's a network in town doing just that. Rogue Media Network has produced over 80 original podcasts and shows ranging from comedy, true crime, business, and now sports. If there's a story to tell, Rogue Media Network is telling it. You can find this podcast and all the other great Rogue Media Network shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks to our partners at Rogue Media Network. For Brooke Bednarz, for Hailey Cowan, I'm John Morris. That's this week's Sikkim Podcast.
You've been listening to the Sikkim Podcast, powered by Rogue Media Network. The Sikkim Podcast is a production of Baylor Athletics.